The digital age is, it used to be, you had your TV, you had your billboards. Now we're just bombarded with advertisements and ads and promotions every which way, and people are just numb to it. They don't even see anything. And so for you to be able to break through that noise and create interest and desire is really critical for lead generation.
It's focus on the prospect and not on you.
Yes.
Because when you can focus on a prospect's pain points, desires, challenges, like what's keeping this prospect up and at night, and if I can speak to those challenges that my prospect is having, I am for sure going to convert them into a lead or somebody that's actually interested in my product or service, because I'm showing them that bridge.
Welcome back to the Takeover. Today, we're going to show you 2 strategies that are going to help you dominate any industry. And specifically, we're going to do a deep dive into lead generation and appointment setting. They are 2 different components. We're going to go into exactly how you can start implementing strategies today to dominate your industry. Before we dive into the 4 components of lead generation and appointment setting, let's define what lead generation and appointment setting is, because being in the industry of outbound and outreach since 2015, I can tell you everybody has a different definition for lead generation, appointment setting, and it's very important that you use the right definition of these 2.
For sure. And I think even too, as a business owner, when you're going to hire a marketing agency or a lead gen agency, understanding exactly what you're getting, the difference between a lead versus an appointment, it is absolutely different. And so in this episode, we definitely want to highlight what the differences are, and then more specifically, how a business owner, entrepreneur, marketing professional can really start generating leads as well as appointments. So really simply, we think about lead generation as the process for generating interest. Okay. So a lead is somebody that has that initial interest in my product or service. Okay, so they're curious. I've given them some kind of desire, or I've sparked or hit on one of their needs that they've garnered that interest. So they become a lead. And the difference between a lead and a booked appointment or a sales appointment is that you've actually turned that curiosity or that interest into action. So an appointment then becomes somebody that is on my calendar that has committed and said, yes, I want to learn more about what it is that you're offering and actually take the next steps in the sales process. So the biggest difference between the 2 is a lead has sparked interest, shown interest, but an appointment has taken that action, which is the key word here, action, to take the next steps in your sales funnel.
And I think I see a lot of times, being on sales calls, reviewing sales calls, working with sales teams, I see a lot of times lead generation companies, they will sell a prospect list as leads. Like, oh, I've got 10,000 leads a month. But what it is, it's a list of prospects or potential people. It's contact information. And so when we're defining leads, if you're ever talking to a lead generation company, you got to ask them how they define leads. Because I've seen people say, we're going to do 10,000 leads a month. And you look and it's literally, they're just sending you a list of contacts that has been sold to like 50 people. So leads, specifically in what we're talking about today, is somebody who has shown interest in your product and raised their hand and said, hey, I'm interested in this, either more information or let's talk. Whereas an appointment is where you actually have the meeting with the person that is interested in your product and service. And I think, if you are doing your own lead generation, you're looking to hire somebody, you're looking at strategies, it's very clear, it's very important to have clarity on these definitions, because there's a lot of, I use this word in another episode, but there's a lot of bamboozling that goes around in our industry, unfortunately.
For sure. And I mean, too, when you're thinking about the difference between leads and appointments, as a salesperson, as an entrepreneur, as a business owner, you have to know the difference between those 2, but also, and I think more importantly, you have to know that a lead or a booked appointment is not a customer.
Yeah.
They have not said yes to purchase your offering, your product, your service just yet. So even if an agency or a company is promising you leads and they're promising you booked appointments, it does not guarantee or even mean that they're promising you paying customers, right? There is still a sales process that has to happen to turn that sales appointment on your calendar into money in the bank, a paying customer.
Yeah.
So understanding the difference between it is so important.
Yeah, there's just two different systems. It's one, it's generating interest, and then it's converting interest.
Yes,
right? And then,
that's well said.
So I love that. Let's go ahead and jump into what are the 4 key components of lead generation and appointment setting.
Yes, let's dive into those 4. So this is the ultimate lead generation and appointment setting guide, whether you are brand new to appointment setting and lead generation, or you've done this a few times. This is going to give you just practical step-by-step on how you can actually get booked appointments on the calendar to convert into paying customers. So the first one is you need a target list. Now this target list, we're going to dive into each of these 4 a little bit further, but essentially that target list is just what Tim was talking about, which is a list of potential prospects.
Yeah.
And notice this is just step 1 in an entire 4-part component, right? There's like 4 steps.
We're not, this is not
That's just
like
number
the
1.
end result.
It is
We're going to
not.
get you a list of 10,000 leads. Like, no.
That's just step 1. That's just
Yeah,
step 1.
yeah.
So first you need a target list, a pool of people that you're going to reach out to or target to pitch your product or service.
Okay.
Second, you need a way to either stimulate or channel or create desire. So I have the list and I want to create desire or interest around my product or service.
Yeah.
The third, I want a consistent process. So the more consistent I could be with how I say reach out to the person, create interest and convert, that systemized process actually makes my lead generation more scalable, right? So number 3 is a consistent process. And then number 4 is a solid follow-up structure or strategy, where I know every lead that comes into my funnel is being consistently followed up with.
Yes.
So the 4 are the target list, creating interest or desire, having a consistent process, and then moving that into a follow-up process. So let's dive into each of those 4 more specifically.
I think we could do an entire hour-long episode for each one of these components. And so I think what we're going to give here, let's make sure to give a ton of value, and just people, if you're listening, come back, listen to this multiple times, because we're doing over 5 million reach outs a month now. We've done over 100 million reach outs. We work with big enterprise companies. We've worked with public companies that have, $2 billion companies. Of everything in between. And so what we're talking about here isn't just we're just throwing some theory out there. Where we actually are doing this. We've been doing this for a long time. And so the strategies we're going to walk you through here, make sure you're taking notes, and you might want to come back and listen again, because the strategies we have here are you can execute on, and they freaking work. First off, let's talk about the prospect list, right? When you're about to do a bunch of activity, reach outs, call outs, whatever it's going to be, the quality of your list, who's on that list, the people you're targeting, that is such a crucial component to your outreach. Now, you're never going to get this perfect.
Yeah.
A big mistake that I see people make all the time is they try to get their lead quality perfect right off the bat. And as we always say at our company, Pima, is you want to get flow first, and then you want to refine that flow. Because if I have a lot of flow of meetings and a lot of flow of interest, I also have a lot of data points.
Yep.
I understand what's working, what's not, what's good, what's not. And so I don't want to take too many of my assumptions into building my prospect list. I want to be a little bit more broad with my assumptions. That way I can get a higher flow of leads when I get going, and then refine it from there. But the first thing you want to do is make sure that you do have a quality prospect list, whether it's company size, industries, titles you're going after. Make sure to spend some time to ensure that you have a good quality prospect list that is also a big enough audience that I can not just get meetings from it now and next month and 6 months from now, but once I get it working and I want to double, triple, 10x my lead flow, I got to make sure whatever prospect list that I'm starting with, I can grow it and it can become bigger and my audience pool is bigger. And that's kind of what I was saying before, is too many people try to niche down way too much from the get-go, and they either can't get it to work, or they get it to work and they can't scale it because they've limited who they're reaching out to.
For sure. And I think a lot of people ask, okay, where do I get this list from? Because as you were mentioning in the beginning, there are companies that will sell lead lists. So in this case, we're not necessarily saying you have to go out and purchase a lead list.
Right.
I think a different way to frame it is, where does your ideal client live, right? Like, what platforms are they the most active on? For some companies, it's Meta, and you can build out this list inside of like Facebook or Meta's ad platform, right? Where you can select your audience and their age and their parameters and things like that. For a lot of our clients, it's on LinkedIn, where you can utilize tools like LinkedIn Sales Navigator to actually create your target list or your target audience. You can filter it by things like you were saying, company size or industry, titles. But the biggest question to ask in this first step is, where do my ideal clients live? On what platforms are they the most active? Maybe you want to reach out to them via email. So you know you need a list of the right email addresses. Okay, so this is going to look different depending on your company, depending on your offering, but always just think about, where do the majority of my target audience hang around? On what platforms are they the most active?
And if you're B2B, it's like...
It's LinkedIn.
It's LinkedIn.
For sure.
LinkedIn, you know, because it's the largest database of business owners, executives, professionals. It has the highest income per capita of user base than any other platform. So unless you're selling a really low entry level product, like if you're selling something super cheap, run meta ads for your B2B, it'll go great. You know, it's very easy. Well, I mean, it's not easy, but you know,
It's not easy.
It's like, but if you're going after high quality clients in the B2B space, LinkedIn is going to be where you can build your target list, because it's the largest business to business professional platform database on the planet. And if you know how to use the parameters correctly, you can get super dialed in. And now we've built an internal software that allows us to kind of get that contact information at scale for email and for LinkedIn, but you don't need like this crazy sophisticated thing. If your clients are other businesses or other professionals, definitely just go right into the LinkedIn Sales Navigator to build out your targets.
It's really simple and it's super effective.
Once you have the list, the second thing is how do I get an interest with these people? How, right? I've got the right people, and I think a lot of clients will come to us at our company Pima and say, "Hey, look, I know who I need to meet with. I've got the list. I know. I've tried to reach out and I cannot get them to respond." And we live in a really crowded time. Like
yes.
The digital age is, you know, it used to be, you know, you had your TV, you had your billboards. Now we're just bombarded with advertisements and ads and promotions every which way, and people are just numb to it. They don't even see anything. And so for you to be able to break through that noise and create interest and desire is really critical for lead generation. So how do we do that, Cindy? How do we take this list and then actually get in front of the people and get their interest and get them to respond to us?
For sure. So this comes down to the messaging or the copy that you're going to use to reach out to your ideal prospect. I think why people struggle with this so much and why they're not getting good responses or good lead rates, where people are just not converting, is because they're focusing too much on themselves or their product and their service and how amazing it is, all the features, all the benefits, but they're not focusing on the prospect. So if there's one thing that you take out of garnering interest or creating desire, it's focus on the prospect and not on you.
Yes.
Because when you can focus on a prospect's pain points, desires, challenges, like what's keeping this prospect up and at night, and if I can speak to those challenges that my prospect is having, I am for sure going to convert them into a lead or somebody that's actually interested in my product or service, because I'm showing them that bridge, right? Like, you're right here, you have this challenge, you're in, say, Hell Island, and you want to get to Heaven Island or where things are awesome, and my service can help you bridge that gap. I'm not starting off focusing on how awesome our service is.
Yes.
I start off focusing on the prospect. So this really boils down to having effective messaging, copy, and maybe if you're running ads, having, you know, your ad creative and things like that, truly focus on the pain points that your prospect is having, and then converting that into, let's schedule a time to speak about how we can help you with that challenge.
Yeah, I think it's funny. It's because most people, like, they want to do we do this and we do this. So they lay out like this laundry list of things they do, but they don't realize they're just real humans that have real stresses that could have been up all last night stressing out about work or what, all these different things going on. And to stop somebody in their inbox, in their LinkedIn, on their ads, wherever it is, you have to enter the conversation already happening in their head. You have to be able to speak to the things that are already on their mind, the problems they're dealing with, the desires they have. And when you can find what would be like the mass desire or the mass problem that the majority of your audience is going to have, and you speak to that directly, then you're going to be able to stop. You're going to be able to stop people in their inbox and actually respond. You know, it's not that hard, but it like in the sense of it's not going to be this big complex message, but it is going to be speaking. What's critical is it's speaking to something that they're dealing with, and sometimes one little word shift can make all of the difference. You know,
for sure.
For instance, I know we had a message for a client that we were doing, and we were reaching out to executives and it was like, hey, here's the thing we can do to get your team to perform X amount better. Didn't resonate. And then we made that switch. Hey, you know, we help leaders become the type of leaders that can get their teams to perform X, Y, Z. When we put the focus on the person we were reaching out to, the message was the same. It was just a couple words tweaked. The lead rate went through the roof. So always be focusing on who's the person you're talking to. What's the stresses they have? What are they dealing with? Like, who do they want to be? Like, what are their secretly, like, what do they want and what do they want to solve? And when you can really get in the head of your prospect and not like these silly freaking things that it's like old school demographics. Well, you know, my person's a 35-year-old retiree that loves to drink Starbucks and gets mocha. No, it's like, what are my platform target? Like, who the people I'm reaching out to? What are the real issues that they're dealing with? And if you can speak to that, you can stop them because they'll go, yes, this person gets me. This person understands me. Maybe you don't have them buying your product yet, but you have their interest enough for them to go, hey, you know what? I am dealing with that problem. This would be worth 30 minutes of my time to chat with you to see if you could help me with that.
Yes, so good. And this is arguably the number one reason that people get on calls with our sales team. Yeah. It's like we're reaching out to, entrepreneurs, owners, decision makers of multi-million dollar companies. And these are super busy people that don't just get on the phone to get on the phone. And the common reason that we always hear is, I don't know, there was something about your message that stood out. There was something that you said specifically that got me to say yes to a call. And we know what it is. It's this one thing, the fact that we're speaking to the challenge that this entrepreneur, this executive is facing right now in their business. And it's like a present, current challenge that gets them to take action. So there's one thing that you take out of point number 2, which is how do you create interest or garner desire? It's focus on what your prospect is dealing with right now, what their challenges, their hopes, their aspirations are, and turning that into a call to action for your product or service.
Right. And it's not just for certain type of businesses. This works for every kind of person you're reaching out to. I mean, we have executives of $200 million companies. I never respond to these messages, but yours stuck out to me, $10 million companies, multi-billion dollar companies. It's just human psychology. If you're focused on you and how cool your product is, no one cares. But if you're focused on them and what's in it for them, they will care. And that's the big differentiator. And it does take some iterations. Just because you send out a message right off the bat and you feel like it's focused on what they're dealing with, you feel like it's focused on their problem, you still got to test, you still got to iterate and really make sure that it's dialed in into your lead rate is good enough where you know that you can scale your outreach.
For sure. And then if you're tracking data, you'll know like response rate, right? How good is my message by how are people responding or interacting with it? Lead rates, as you're mentioning, what's the percentage of people that we reached out to that actually converted into a lead? Those are 2 very simple metrics that you can track. So say you reach out to 100 people and you have 35 of them actually respond, whether it's yes, no, neutral, that's a 35% response rate. And then what's the percentage of people that actually converted into a lead, right? And remember from the beginning, a lead is somebody that has shown interest. They've said yes to a call. They want more information. You can also calculate those metrics from there to see how your message or copy or anything is producing.
So what is number 3?
Okay, so number 3 is having a consistent and scalable process. So a lot of the reasons why people are not successful with lead generation or appointment setting is that they try something for 1 week and then they switch the process or the strategy the next week, or they're not doing enough follow-ups, which we'll talk about in number 4. But essentially, you need to have a consistent process that you are committing to follow over a set period of time before you determine whether something works or not. Okay, so consistency in the message that you're sending out, in how many follow-ups that you're doing, consistency in how you're reaching out to prospects and converting them into booked appointments. So map out what that consistent process looks like. And if you are hiring a lead gen agency or hiring a VA to do it for you, make sure that you're holding them accountable to following that process, right? And it may be something that you have to build over time and that you have to refine. But the best way to track really good data is by having that process consistent from the start. Because if you're tweaking it one day and then the next day you're doing something else, you're not going to achieve the results that are actually possible with this type of lead generation or appointment setting. And then with that is how scalable is your process, right? Scalability is so important when you're thinking about lead generation. Are you going to reach the limits of your target list, say in a month or in 3 months? What are you going to do next, right? So you have to think about, or at least when we're thinking about lead generation, we're thinking about how long-term or how scalable is this strategy. If it's only going to work for a month or 2 and then I'm back to square one, it's probably not the best strategy to utilize, right? If I'm going to reach the limits of my target list in 2 months, then what happens? What am I going to do? So think about, how do I make it consistent? How do I make it a proven process? And then the third, how do we make it scalable so that if I know I reach out to 10,000 people and get 100 meetings, I know that I can just double and triple that to keep growing my lead flow as well.
Making sure there's data points for every step in the process. You know, step 1, we get list. How big is the list that you need to get every time? Step 2, we reach out to the list. Step 3, how many people are responding? Based off of, they say, tell me more, or not interested. There has to be a process for every single response in there.
Yes.
And data points for every single step, because when you have every single step laid out and a data point for each, you let it run long enough to have enough data. That's what we were talking about before. Go broader so you can have bigger flow, have more outreach going, and then you dial in the data points. And then when you have that piece laid in where you go, okay, I know all my data points are really good. That's when you're, like Sydney was saying, if I'm reaching out to 10,000 people and I'm getting 100 meetings, well, what do I need to do to get 1,000 meetings?
Yes.
Reach out to 100,000 people, right? I just 10x my effort. And that's where you become really scalable. And a lot of people mess up because they try to speed too quickly to the result. They just want the meetings and they're not paying attention to all the pieces in between. So they don't know why it's working, or even worse, it works for a little bit and they don't know why it worked.
Yeah.
And so you want to understand all of the pieces, but also have data points for each piece so that you can see as you scale, because sometimes as you scale too, the quality or the numbers can degrade, and you got to understand where that happens.
So good. Yeah, on that, what you mentioned is essentially having a process that's repeatable. So knowing why something works, why something doesn't work, so that you can repeat it and you can scale your lead flow.
And number 4, of course, the money is in the
follow-up.
Yes.
Money's in the follow-up for sure. So it's kind of linked to number 3, is essentially having that process for how you are going to follow up with prospects. Because you might send, say, your initial pitch message and somebody skims through it and they don't respond. But if you don't follow up with that prospect, you don't really know if you're able to convert them or not. So the money is in the follow-ups. Make sure that you are touching base with your prospect 1, 2, 3, 4 times. We recommend actually 4 touch points with a prospect. Of course, you can spread them out, but that allows you to keep top of mind with your prospect. And in the event that people are busy, which they are, they might see your message. If they don't respond, people appreciate a follow-up.
Yeah.
And that can actually help to boost your lead rates as well. So don't expect to just send one message and for the leads to come streaming in. You have to be consistent in how you follow up with prospects to get them to say yes to your offer.
So there's follow-ups to get the lead, and then there's follow-ups to turn the lead into an appointment. Remember, because we're talking about getting the interest and then getting the appointment. These are actually two different things. They both require follow-up. And too oftentimes people say, well, I don't want to be pushy or buggy. And the reality is, man, is we are just not the most important people in our prospects world at all. Like at all. And things shift and change. They could have been in the office and this looks awesome, perfect. And then all of a sudden a client is like a fire's happening with a client, or they got in a fight with their wife this morning. Like whatever million things happen to you, happen to us, it also happens to your prospect. And you got to just realize your job, if you want their business, is to stay on their radar. And you wouldn't believe how many times, a lot of people are scared. I don't want to sound pushy. I don't want to sound. We have a lot of people. Thank you so much for your persistence and follow-up. It's been a busy month. Thank you very much. We get them on the phone. We do well with our conversion process, which is another topic for another day. They turn into clients. Everything's good. But it is those pieces. Do not be scared to follow up, because the money is in the follow-up to get the lead, number one, to get the interest. And number two, once you have the interest, to convert that lead into an actual booked call.
So good.
And the same is with getting them to show up to the call, making sure you have the right follow-up so they show up. And we have like an 80 to 95% show rate in our company. I mean, I think this last month it was almost 100. It was like 95%, which is unheard of show rate in when we're talking about B2B sales. And so trust me, when you master those follow-up pieces in every part of the funnel, including the sales funnel, including turning them into a call and upselling the client, all of those pieces, you're going to be able to dominate for sure. So the money is in the follow-up. But as we talked about before, there needing to be a repeatable process that needs to not be random.
Yep.
So as the COO and as you're working with the team and the lead and the appointment sides and creating those strategies, how do you see follow-up? Like, how do you really build out processes like that for clients?
Yeah, so good. So it is a part of the process for sure. So we have that. We're talking about just messaging. Okay. So say, for example, we're doing an outbound campaign for a client inside of LinkedIn. So we have that initial message, like we spoke about, that's going to create the interest, spark that desire. If somebody doesn't respond to that initial message, we're going to send them a follow-up in like 2 days.
Yeah.
If they don't respond to that, we send them another follow-up. So we're sending them about 4 follow-ups in that initial sequence, getting them to just show interest, ask for more information, or even say yes to a call. Once we've gotten somebody to say yes to a call, or they've showed interest in some way, we're going to follow up with them, as you're mentioning, Tim, until they actually schedule a call on the calendar. And those follow-ups, of course, look different depending on where the prospect is in the funnel. But even just a light touch base, like, hey, did you notice my last message? Or, hey, I'm sure things are really busy on your end. Here's the link again to book a call with us. These simple follow-ups go a long way, and people definitely do appreciate persistence. And if they don't, they'll let you know. They'll say it. And that's also fine. That's also fine.
Yeah. And it's what's interesting too is because it's not just immediate. Like we think about, we take a client on, we're doing their initial outreach, we get results super quick. We're getting meetings super quick because we have those funnels so obsessively dialed in like crazy. But also there's still people that don't book despite how many follow-ups we do. 6 months into a campaign, we have so many people that were leads that didn't book, even though we got a lot of them to book, that within 6 months, we now have this big list that we keep following up with them every month. It's like, hey, the client needs a little extra meetings this week. We follow up with that old list that didn't book and we get them back on the calendar. So there's also, the more you do this, the more you build your pipeline. I think a big mistake people make is they don't follow up with old pipeline. They're constantly looking for the new lead. They're constantly looking for the new interest. And some of our biggest like months come for our clients when we're 4, 5, 6 months in, because they have so much pipeline built that when we keep following up, it starts to compound like the snowball effect, where it just builds and builds and builds. And so, the follow-up is good. You got to make sure there's a process behind it. You got to make sure that you're also optimizing that process, because you don't want to just do randoms. You want to start seeing what's getting people to respond the best, what's messages are not, and really optimizing the whole funnel process on that. Cindy, getting the meeting is a different thing than getting the interest, because there is internally what we call a lead to book rate, which is a very important part of the process, that just because you have interest doesn't mean that you have a booking. And a lot of times we'll see people that come in that have maybe worked with other lead generation companies, and they number one, their lead flow wasn't very high, but the lead to book rate was very low. And our lead to book rate is very, very high. So what is that process of what you have to go through to turn an interested person, AKA a lead, into an actual book call on the calendar?
Yeah, for sure. So we're speaking about this kind of the difference between the lead generation process and appointment setting, right? So remembering that once we've gotten the lead, the interest, somebody said yes to a call, they've shown some kind of interest, we have to now get them to be a booked appointment on our calendar. So this is where kind of the appointment setting comes into play. So there's three things I like to think about when it comes to converting from lead generation to appointment setting. The first is the timing. So you really want to strike while the iron is hot, meaning once somebody has shown interest or they've said, yes, I want to meet, they've sparked that interest, you want to get them as soon as possible to schedule a call. If I show interest today and it's Monday, don't wait until Friday or even until Wednesday to send me a link to book a call with you. So the faster you can get that call to action in front of the person, the faster they're going to convert, and actually the more effective it's going to be to converting them into an actual appointment. So this is where the process comes into play. How quickly are you responding to leads that are showing interest? That is going to make a big difference in your appointment setting. The second part to that is the call to action, just making it very, very clear. If you want somebody to schedule a call, provide like a calendar link or make it really seamless and easy for them to take the next step in the process. If there is friction and you have to go back and forth about times and, what day works for you? And then the person's not active on the platform anymore. And now it's been a week and they're not a hot lead anymore. It just will destroy your entire process. So for sure you want that timing. You want your CTA or call to action, which means what is that next step you want the process or the prospect to take? Make it very smooth, very easy, make it seamless for them to take the next action. And then the third part to that is what we call the rule of 7. So essentially a prospect has to see your message or see your ad, something. They have to see it at least 7 times to build trust and build familiarity and authority. So putting yourself in front of your prospect as many times as possible is also going to help boost that lead to booking ratio. So this could be as simple as retargeting or your content showing up on their feed, or even those follow-ups like we were mentioning. The more your prospect can see you, the more effective you are going to be in converting them from a lead to a booked appointment.
Yeah, and it's not just on a conscious level. They're not just well, I've seen this person 7 times, and now it's I feel more comfortable with them. It's on an unconscious level. If you think about any person or any ad you've seen anywhere, at first you're oh, who's this joker? And then they keep showing up, and then they keep showing up, and eventually you realize oh, this person's really established. And so that's the biggest thing, is most of what you're doing with staying in front of your prospect. Even if they, once they book a call, especially, it's making sure you're staying in front of them. But even before they book a call, staying in front of them actually works on a subconscious level to build trust and authority, because the more familiar they are with you, the more comfortable they will be with you, the more they will trust you. And that all happens just by making sure you're showing up in front of them. And we have full trainings on how to do that and how to do your 7 touches. But yeah, there's a very, very critical component that I think a lot of times they try to think too much on a logical level of how people will interact with the content. And it's less about whether each piece of content, each touch is this, wow, mind blowing, this person's
perfect,
amazing.
Yeah.
And it's more about just being in front of them, as long as you're not being offensive or rude or mean, unless that's your brand and that your audience loves that stuff, which there's some people that do. So, but yeah, making sure you're in front of them actually works mostly on a subconscious level to build trust and familiarity. I have trouble saying that word sometimes.
Familiarity.
It's a tough word, but just building trust and familiarity with your prospects. It sounds funny, right?
That was the ultimate lead generation and appointment setting guide. So remember, you start off with that target list, which is the pool of people you're going to reach out to. Find a way to create and stimulate desire and spark interest in your product or service. Make sure you have a very clear process defined, and then make sure that you follow up, because the money is in the follow-up. and then converting from a lead into a booked appointment. Make sure you have a very clear call to action, that you time it super right? The timing has to be spot on, and also that you are hitting up your prospects at least 7 times to make sure you stay in front of them and you are staying top of mind. So that was a lot of information. Make sure that you click the resources right below this video. If you are on audio, click the resources in the show notes. We have a bunch of free resources for you all to make sure that you are generating leads, scaling your companies, and getting more clients, which is always the ultimate goal.
That is the ultimate goal. I mean, the only reason you need leads is because you're trying to make that money.
You gotta make the money. Yes. So this was the Takeover with Tim and Cindy. Remember, domination is not a destination, it's a way of life. Stay winning.